and we are excited to bring you 3 days of really awesome coverage to solidify who's going to be headed to the Players' Championship at the end of the year. I am Cedric Phillips, and I am joined by my 3 comrades that I always do the invitationals with. Number 1, welcome back to the booth, Patrick Sullivan.
Been a bit of a break for me, but I'm glad to be back. Invitational weekends are among my favorite.
Yeah, and we have quite a doozy in front of us. We went through all the scenarios earlier this morning, Matthias. Things are going to get a little nitty-gritty here, you think?
Yeah, always a pleasure to be doing coverage here. We have, for the first time, I think, for our last invitational, we have a very competitive Player of the Year race going on. And to boot, we have some Season 3 races as well.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty close, Ryan. Ryan Overturf, the last person that is joining us. Between the Season 3 races, the Player of the Year race, the at-large bids, one heck of a weekend, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of exciting matchups to watch. Great players coming out here. Those points really matter. It's your last chance to get them. We'll see how things shake out before the PC.
Ryan used a great word there, exciting. Exciting is the way I would describe standard. I think that's how we're going to describe standard. We're going to go over our standard metagame breakdown. We'll do a modern metagame breakdown. We'll make some predictions as well. But we're going to start with the very fun and diverse standard format. All right, so standard. So people claim it's a little boring. People claim it's a 2-deck format. Look, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. We know that the two best decks are in Black Green Delirium and White Blue Flash, but maybe there's some other stuff out there. We're going to go over what we think are going to be the big 5 standard decks here this weekend. But if we didn't start with Black Green Delirium, we wouldn't be doing our job right, Patrick. That means we got to talk about Ishkana, we got to talk about Liliana, Traverse Uvenwald, and the thing that kind of looms over the format that people are kind of not really enjoying, Emrakul.
Well, it's a green-black mid-range deck that puts a lot of power onto the battlefield and plays with a lot of spot removal. You can just win conventional games that way. And then you have Emrakul as your top end as well. And that mixture is very hard for decks to beat. If you're trying to go underneath of it, it's very hard to overpower what they do on the battlefield, especially Ishkana backed up by spot removal spells. And if you're trying to play a more ponderous game, then Emrakul is a huge issue.
We've seen, Matthias, people really try to go after this deck. Unsuccessfully, I would say. It's a really hard deck to kind of go after because Emrakul kind of provides a long game, but also not really a long game because you can cast it kind of ahead of schedule, and Ishkana is so good at bridging the gap to getting to your end game. Is there a way to combat this deck?
I mean, there are ways to combat it. I just want to talk about first the deck as a whole. So, relative to the other decks in Standard, I think in Black Green Delirium we have one of the strongest Standard decks we've seen since the printing of Jace the Mind Sculptor here. This deck's across the board has phenomenal matchups. There's a way to attack it, and we'll get to that deck in a second, but even its worst matchups are only around the 45% mark. This deck's fantastic. You mentioned you get Emrakul in the late game, and it's very rare that you get a deck that can play Emrakul and also kill people with 4/4s for 2 mana at the same time in Grim Flare. This deck really can be pound for pound the best on turn 2 and on turn 10.
Yeah, that's really surprising to see a deck this good early with Grim Flare, this good late with Emrakul. It has kind of a demonic tutor in Traverse the Uvenwald, Ryan, and then it has Liliana as the most powerful planeswalker maybe in the format. We'll get to Gideon when we get to Flash in a second here. I don't know if this is really your style of deck, but you have to admit it's a pretty good one.
It's very powerful. It's really hard to beat. You want to either be faster than Ishkana or between Ishkana and Emrakul with your target plan to win the game. It's kind of a moving target. It's really hard to establish which turn Emrakul is actually going to come down, whether you can deal with the second Ishkana even. I'm a pretty big Torrential Gearhulk fan, but it's really difficult to face this deck head on.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. I mean, kind of coming into this tournament, right, we know that Black Green Delirium is going to be a huge player this weekend. Brad Nelson winning the Open in Knoxville, so obviously him putting that on the map, he's a big name, big win that weekend to put himself into the race for the Players' Championship. We know we're going to see it. We also know we're going to see White Blue Flash, Matthias. Now, when you think of this deck, you think of Smuggler's Copter, you think of Spell Queller, you think of Reflector Mage, you think of Gideon, Archangel Avacyn, all of that stuff. This might be a little bit more your speed, maybe too much attacking for you, but talk to me about White Blue Flash and this deck that really put itself on the map at the Pro Tour and has been very good ever since.
So there's been a lot of talk about this being a 2-deck format, and I'm going to go ahead and back up and say that one of these decks, I don't know that I think it lives up to the hype on a 2-deck format, and that's going to be White Blue Flash. Now, there are some things to like about the deck, mainly that because it gets to play blue cards like Ceremonious Rejection, it has just phenomenal matchups against really, I think, anything but the top 3 decks. So you look at your Torrential Gearhulk decks, your Aetherwork Marvels decks, White Blue is great. Now, where it has a chink in the armor is its black-green matchup and its vehicles matchup can both be a little rough, but this tempo game is great against, I think, all the other things you could be doing right now.
most recently, Ryan, people are trying to poke holes in this deck and say that, it doesn't really make sense that this deck does very well. It kind of taps out on weird turns. It plays a flash game, but doesn't really play a flash game. And now people kind of know what the deck is up to. Does that mean the deck's not any good anymore, or is it still a player to you?
Well, the card that really holds everything together is Gideon Allies Zendikar. The power of that card is not contested by anybody. Even if you think this deck is a little flimsy, Gideon is very powerful. It's a card that I have found out firsthand. Even if you think you're ready, you're not always going to be ready for a card of that caliber on turn 4. And really, that is what enables the deck to continue to perform in this format, is being able to leverage Gideon very effectively, which I believe it does better than any other deck in the format.
Now, Patrick, for you, I know you Reflector Mage is one of your favorites.
Spellcaller as well.
You love those 3-mana blue-white cards. These are kind of the glue that's holding the deck together. Spellcaller does a nice job of taking care of Marvel decks. Reflector Mage buys you enough time to get Gideon on a stable board, and then this is the best Gideon deck, as Ryan did mention. Black-Green Delirium looms over this format, and it does a nice job against White-Blue Flash. So let's say, can you play a deck that's good against everything but Black-Green Delirium?
Possibly. There are people that are expecting a large presence of Aetherworks Marvel this weekend as an opportunity to attack Black-Green Delirium. That's a hole in that deck's armor. That matchup is phenomenal for Spellcaller and company, plus the ability to sideboard into more counters. If you're able to stabilize the game early enough, if your opponent doesn't jump out way ahead of you, Spellcaller, Reflector Mage, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, and Archangel Avacyn kind of doesn't matter what your opponents bring to the table. That's just too many cards that ignore text boxes and too much raw power as well. I don't know if you can beat Delirium consistently enough for the deck to be viable, but there's plenty of other positive matchups out there.
We know those are going to be the 2 big decks, so now we talk about 3 of maybe the lesser decks. And Ryan, I'm going to start with Mardu Vehicles. It's another Smuggler's Copter deck. It's a little bit lower to the ground, though, and I think one thing that's kind of the appeal of this deck is that it is low to the ground, so it can get under Flash, it can get under Delirium with cards like Toolcraft Exemplar, Veteran Motorist, and Depala as well. Is this an area, be it red, white, or Mardu, that you'd want to go to this weekend?
This is really my favorite deck to cover in the format. It doesn't really have any overwhelmingly positive matchups, but it also doesn't have any overwhelmingly negative matchups. It kind of has game against all the decks in the format. And part of the problem with the deck is, Toolcraft Exemplar, sometimes it's just a 1-1, other times it's a 3-2, it can be a little weak against Liliana the Last Hope. But when this deck is really tuning, everything is working, it goes turn 1, 1-drop, turn 2, double 1-drop, get an artifact on the battlefield on turn 3, you can really beat anything in the format. That's really the strength of this deck.
Matthias, attacking, maybe getting under people, getting under Marvel, getting under Delirium, getting under Flash, just getting under every other deck, even the control decks that I know you like. It's not normally your style, but can you appreciate people who are trying to do that this weekend?
Right, well, I mean, even if you talk to the Flash players, the draws they're most excited about are things like Thraben Inspector into Smuggler's Copter. Mardu Vehicles just has so much more of that. You get Inventor's Apprentice, you get Toolcraft Exemplar. You are going to get control of the board very early on, and then just kind of, I guess, almost play a Delver-like strategy where you just get control and hang on for maybe 4 or 5 turns until you can win the game. I think that's really powerful. What I'm actually interested in is seeing if anyone is going to be playing the tokens version. We saw Sam Black get 2nd place in one of our classics in standard with that deck. Some rumblings I've heard from the room that they may believe that there's a lot of teams believing that is actually the stronger version of Mardu or red-white vehicles this weekend.
Well, Patrick, we know you love red and white cards. We know you like to beat down, so this is certainly your speed. Given the prevalence of Liliana, the prevalence of Grasp of Darkness, Ishkana with Delirium, seems really tough for this deck to beat. Is this too much of a risk for players this weekend?
I would not go near this deck. I mean, I love to attack, I love to be down, don't get me wrong, but I think that both Blue White Flash and Delirium put too much pressure on you to get on top of them very early, because there's a point of no return, either Ishkana out of the Delirium deck, or just falling behind Spellcaller, Reflector Mage, Archangel Avacyn, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar. That's a losing recipe as well. Also, both Flash and Delirium can start interacting as early as the 1st or 2nd turn, so it's not always an exploitable route, even if you have your best draws, and a lot of your cards get chewed up by Liliana as well. I would not play this deck this weekend.
There's some good cards in this deck, but I'm kind of on the side of you. It seems pretty difficult to go that direction. Now, you did mention, Patrick, that one place people are going is Aetherworks Marvel. The all-in version for the Pro Tour, that's kind of off the table now. We see green-red versions, we see green-black versions, we see teamer versions with Marvel, with Emrakul, with Ulamog, and with energy providers like Hub and Harness Lightning and all that stuff. It's a combo deck, sort of. So how do we feel about this deck this weekend?
Well, this is a metagame call. If you think there's going to be a lot of black-green Delirium and not a whole lot of blue-white Flash, this is a fine choice. Your Delirium matchup is excellent. You're way behind against blue-white Flash, and you're flipping coins against a lot of the other beatdown decks in the format. If you think that's where the metagame is right for, then this deck is a fine choice, but it is really rolling dice, because I think the Flash matchup is, you can't really solve it.
Well, Matthias, is that where you think the metagame is?
I think he's right where the metagame is, yeah. One of the issues, though, is that you need to make sure your green-black matchup is still excellent. We saw 2 weekends ago in Knoxville, Brad Carpenter's team playing the black-green Aetherworks Marvel build, and by playing a lot of mid-range spells and not being full combo deck, they started losing to Delirium again, because Delirium's just that good. If you want to make this meta call, I'm in, but I want to go back to that Pro Tour all-in Marvel build. I do not want to lose any points in that black-green matchup. I want to be a straight combo deck. And if you want to do that, like you said, sure, flip coins against the aggro decks, beat Delirium. It's a plan. I'm not sure I'd be on it, but that's how I would do it.
Would you be on it, Ryan? Do you want to flip the coins with the Marvel deck? Do you want to be all in, or do you want to kind of hedge with the green reds, the black greens of the world with the Marvel strategy?
So the Marvel deck at the Pro Tour was all Ulamogs, Emrakuls, those were your only hits, and that deck was just demolished by Spellcaller. We saw the evolution recently. They picked up Ishkanas, and you start to beat up a blue-white flash. You can't Spellcaller an Ishkana. And most recently, we've seen builds with Ishkana and maybe 1-2 Ulamogs. I think if I was on this strategy, that's about where I'd want to be. Have enough of the big hits so you can actually consistently tango with green-black, and then Ishkana so you can actually play Magic against the Spellcaller decks.
Okay, well, there are other strategies out there to be sure. There are Torrential Gearhawk decks, there are blue control decks. We saw Jeskai and Grixis in the finals of the Pro Tour, but realistically, those are the big 4 decks, so that does it for our standard analysis. We take a short break here from Atlanta. When we do come back, we'll talk about everyone's favorite format, Modern. See you guys back here for that in a sec.